This is the BBC.
Dear brothers and sisters, all are welcome here at the Confessions podcast, whether saint or sinner.
Hello, this is Simon. Obviously, we're not here this week, but just because this Confessions podcast is a hard habit to break, we're going to bring you some very special confessions from the Crypt, individually selected and handcrafted. Here they come.
Simon Mayo's Confessions podcast. Please be seated.
This one comes from, let's call him Twister, all right? Thanks, Twister. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. And I have sinned about B-days. Now, we had a B-day confession a couple of weeks back, which got destroyed, I think, in the process of the confession, because it was balancing a ping-pong ball, and then it blew up. Anyway, Twister says, however, this confession was a sin, but it was a sin to protect the innocent, and it lasted for many years. I am 61 years young. My daughter is 35-ish, and when she was about 6, she asked me what a B-day was. She was and still is my little girl, and I was not going to tell her anything that was not the truth. So I explained that they were used to wash football boots. And as she didn't have any at the time, she needn't worry about that at all. You can just forget about it. That's what they're there for. It's not a bad answer. All okay then, no problem. I completely forgot about that until last year. My daughter, son-in-law, 2 grandchildren, my wife and I decided it would be easier to sell our 2 houses and move all together into one house. How about that? The modern-day Waltons, to use an old-fashioned TV reference. In our new joint house, there was not 1, but 2 B-days. Imagine that. How far up in the world have you gone? Yes. 2 B-days. 1 in the main bathroom and 1 in the ensuite. Predictably, the response from my wife and daughter was, well, they're going. Well, still no problem that I could see. Now, I should explain I am starting to retire and my daughter is slowly taking over the family optician's business. She needs to establish that she is now the boss and I am helping, I think. Anyway, one day, when dealing with a patient, she was explaining about this new idea, the Waltons house, and all seemed to be going well, except that we would be redoing both bathrooms, she said, and removing both B-days, as we had no need for that kind of thing anymore. So the patient looked puzzled. My daughter said, nothing needs to be that clean. So, the patient obviously managed to look a little bit more puzzled. So my daughter then said, you know, football boots. No one needs to wash football boots, do they? Well, the patient looked somewhat confused. The staff kept a straight face. The patient left, and then the staff quizzed their new boss. Was that a joke? They asked. No, says my daughter. They then explained what a B-day was for, and my daughter was shocked. She didn't believe it, so she Googled it and was more shocked that it was true. And so, yes, it's back to lying to kids. I seek forgiveness for my lie, but in my defence, 1, the best use for a B-day is washing football boots. 2, I was protecting my innocent child. And 3, what the hell is going on with education in this country that someone can go through life not knowing what a B-day is? Although it isn't my job, says Twister. And if I'm not forgiven, we may have to look for 2 houses again, and that will be on your head. Okay, well, it's very good, and it is one of those things, and it does cause confusion. But for that moment, that sitcom moment, where your daughter is explaining to the patient who's having the eye test done that nothing needs to be that clean, you're in. All right, Twister, so let's see what Bobby makes of that.
I love family folklores. They're great, aren't they? Because they're so specific to the absurdities of all of us.
But you can see, it would be perfect for cleaning shoes.
Well, you see, I disagree here. And my point is that football boots get covered in mud, thick mud. So when you wash them, you actually need some force. So I don't think actually a B-day is the best place to wash them in.
Isn't it?
And I don't think B-days actually have that much force. What you need is a hose pipe. And also, you get big clumps of mud.
From a B-day.
So you don't... No, it's a whole different experience. What I'm saying is the football boots need...
Does it not have a rotary dial?
Anyway, you two, anyway, what I'm saying, you get big clumps of mud and you don't want that going down your plug hole. So what I'm saying is, Twister, I love the idea of what you told her. I think you're forgiven, but I need a spade to dig myself out of this one. You're forgiven, Twister. I'm going now. Back to you, Simon.
Very good.
Brother Matthew.
Well done. Obviously she's led a very sheltered... I mean, you can't really say it's down to an education. There's no lessons where anyone tells you what a B-day is actually for.
You'd think it's like general knowledge. By the time you're in your 30s.
I suppose you would have thought so. A very sheltered life. So, yes, I am going to forgive. That was definitely the best one we've had in a while.
The Confessions Podcast.
What you need is a drive-time confession. That's what you need, because it's all here with your collective, which features the Venerable Deadly.
A very, very good afternoon to you.
We have Brother Nigel.
In the confessional.
Thank you very much indeed. Mother Superior making a sick appearance.
Well, I've been away doing some penitence, and I've come back for just a one-off appearance, all right? And I've learnt a lot when I've been away, actually.
You spread a lot
I'm
of germs.
far more forgiving than I used to be.
Well, we'll put that to the test, shall we? Here's today's tale, and it comes from Kath. Thank you very much indeed for tonight's story. Father Simon and the Dudes of Delusion.
How dare you?
Well, here we go on a story I've worried about for a long time. I'm in my respectable early 40s with 3 kids under 15 called John, Stephen and Mary, though we've changed the names. Okay. We live in South Wales and we moved here 8 years ago. I had to move for my job, so we pulled up our roots in London and we moved to this very lovely town where I'm writing to you from today. I have no regrets now, but things were tough to start with, as none of my kids wanted to move. When I told them we were moving to Wales, I'm afraid 2 of them had to look it up on a map and pronounced it too far away. I repeat that we love it now, and essentially we have 3 Welsh kids in an Anglo-Welsh house, but at the time, they were pretty cross. We moved in the summer and I had a few weeks to get things straight for the new school term. The most time-consuming was getting the uniforms right. All 3 were in the same school, and so 3 lots of everything needed to be bought. Games kit, PE kit, sweatshirt, trousers, skirt, ties, and most expensively, blazers. Ugh. Lovely blue dark things they were, with the school crest on a badge. I won't be too specific, but it was pretty grand and had a dragon on it. Well, I managed to source most of the uniform second-hand, but the blazers were brand new and did look fabulous. When they all tried them on, I have to admit, I had a little sob. 3 cutest school kids you never did see. I spent most of the night before term started sewing on the school badges to the blazers. I'm not great at sewing, but I thought I'd done a pretty neat job. The red dragon looked stunning against the dramatic dark cotton of the blazer. The first day dawned with all the usual nerves and worries. Notes about allergies, permission forms, school bags, pencil cases were all sorted. John is the oldest, but he was by some way the most nervous and actually scared about the first day in a new school. I drove them the relatively short distance to school, and we sang songs on the way to keep the mood as jolly as possible. It later turned out that all the kids claimed that it was only me singing, and they were actually pulling faces at each other and me at the time. Respect, I don't think so. Anyway, so I dropped them off and get on with my day, sorting out the house, food shopping and that kind of thing, nervously waiting for the end of the day to find out how they all got on. Because it was the first day, I had agreed to pick them up. And after today, they'd be walking. But I knew that, I knew we were in trouble as soon as little Mary got in the car. She was a picture of misery. Oh, no. John was next, followed by Stephen, and they started shouting at me, all of them together, in essentially what they said was this: "Mum, you got the wrong blazer. This is the wrong school badge. How can you have made such a ridiculous mistake? How can you not know what school we were going to, you ridiculous woman?"
Ooh,
in capital letters. Well, the journey home was not good. Not much singing at all. I had, they said, attached the wrong school badge to the right blazer. Yes to a dragon, no to this particular dragon. All 3 reported that their lives had been made very difficult by this badge bungle. Teasing, laughing, and all the things that you don't need on your first day in a new school. Thanks, Mum. I apologised, bought them chips, and apologised again. New badges were obtained within days. By the end of their week, all was well, except, here's the confession.
Go on.
I knew that the badges were wrong.
What?
It's just that they were the first ones that I found at the end of a very long day of uniform shopping, and they were cheaper, a whole pound cheaper. Yes, I saved £3. I'm not sure why.
Mother.
Yes, to save money, but I bought a badge that looked very similar to the real one, but I saved some cash. I mean, come on, it had a dragon on it.
One dragon's very much... No, it isn't.
Who's going to notice it's the wrong dragon? Answer, absolutely everybody. That's how wrong I was. So, sorry to John and Stephen and Mary. I was trying to save time and money, and all dragons look the same, and they don't exist anyway. But I seek forgiveness from the Caring Collective for a uniform misdemeanor. Well, I guess you can understand, uniform is very, very expensive,
Yes.
but you have to buy the right badge. You can buy the wrong socks, but you don't want to buy the wrong badge. Venerable Deadly.
Wrong badge, Nige. Wrong badge.
Tricky woos, absolutely.
Did you say tricky woos?
Yes, I did.
Don't use that.
All creatures great and small. It's just a throwback.
I can't... Yes, thank you. Aren't you?
Yes.
Unforgivable, I'm afraid. I'm very, very forgiving, but the wrong badge, all those kids, they'd have gone wild. You got the wrong badge. Unforgivable.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'd love to.
You don't want to be different in any way, do you? And anyway, not on the first day. Nigel, what do you say?
Well, I think she got a snoozing lion or dragon, even rather than a rampant one, and that would no doubt that have been ripe for. Bullying, teasing, torture, whatever. But she was obviously exhausted. She'd taken it all on herself by the sounds of it, Kathy. And she tried to save £3, but she obviously spent more than that because she no doubt had to go and get the correct badge.
Yeah, she did, yeah.
But I just feel sorry for her because the kids didn't want to go. It's worked out, but at the time she was doing her best job. So, Kathy, from me, you are forgiven.
They'll doubtless...
Oh, Nigel, you're such a forgiving person.
On this occasion...
One of those kids will write a misery memoir one day about how their life was ruined by having the wrong badge on
the blazer was the pièce de résistance.
Their dragon wings were clipped, poor kids.
Mother Superior...
We're going through an awful lot. I mean, kids never really want to move, do they? I mean, school uniforms are very expensive, but as Nigel's just pointed out, it was a false economy. If she bought the cheap ones, but she ended up having to buy the expensive ones, so it was twice as much. And, kids are so easily humiliated in a new situation where they feel all different and wrong anyway. So, Kathy, I'm sure it was a difficult move. I really can't forgive you because it was... We had a similar confession to this, didn't we, once when the parents were in a new place and they dropped their children off at the wrong school. Do you remember that?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And this is a similar thing. No, I really don't forgive you, Kathy.
She'd sort of cut corners elsewhere, hadn't she? So why cut corners on the
she
blazer?
bought games kit, PE kit, sweatshirt, trousers, skirt, ties and blazers and saved £3 on the badges.
She was cream crackered. And what she didn't realise then, she will now, that the Welsh are very dragon specific. As we found out,
you need
rugby
the right
recently,
dragon.
yes.
This is the place where penitents seek our pardon for their sins. Simon Mayo's Confessions Podcast.
Brother Matt is here, Sister Rebecca, and the Venerable Deadly has deigned us with his presence.
Bless you.
Pardon?
Bless you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Sneeze.
Yet.
Well, here we go, and we're merely moments away from some derogatory comment that he's going to make.
I've gone a long way for this.
Have you already written down "not forgiven"?
Not yet. It's only a matter
Feeling
of time.
grumpy. This one from Roger in Rugby. Thank you, Roger in Rugby. Dear Father Simon and the Forgiveness Few, this tale goes back to the summer of the mid-90s when I was an engineering graduate still looking for work. I'd applied for a number of engineering posts since my graduation, but nothing was forthcoming. And then my luck changed. I was called for an interview at a well-known aviation research facility. My idea of job heaven, given my love of aircraft and the thought of working with new technologies. I knew that I had to look my best, but being a poor graduate, I had to make do with my suit that I'd used for university placement interviews. University living had meant that I'd grown a little bit where I would rather I hadn't, but the suit did still fit just a little bit snug in places. So I set off from my parents' house in Felixstowe by public transport, and in due course I arrived at the security and reception area in time for my interview. My timing was spot on. I'd arrived with 10 minutes to spare for the time that they wanted me to arrive. So I signed in at the reception desk and was told that someone would be along to collect me in a few minutes. Would I like to take a seat? As I went to sit down on the low couches, I felt something give, and my heart sank. Actually, that wasn't all that sank. A quick check with my hands confirmed that there was now an enormous split in my trousers. I tried to think, and all that came to mind were safety pins. However, this isn't the sort of thing I carry around with me, what with me being a bloke, so I went back to the receptionist and explained my predicament. She was sympathetic but was unable to provide me with any safety pins, as they aren't standard issue in most office environments. I'd have thought they might have been, but anyway, not this one. But she was able to give me a load of paper clips. Well, thanking her, I dashed into the visitors' toilet and set about trying to repair the damage. In the privacy of the cubicle, I was able to assess the extent of the damage, and it was horrible. My trousers had split at the seams all the way. Stop it, control yourself. My trousers had split at the seams all the way from the...
Go on. The what? All the way from the what?
What? I've got...
Come on.
I've got to say the word gusset, okay?
I know, it's been coming round the corner for a while. Go on.
Do it again. Say it again.
I haven't said it yet.
You have it.
Oh, yeah.
Go on.
You've gone really red.
I'm trying to control myself. My trousers had split at the seams all the way from the gusset area right between my legs to about halfway up my backside.
Well, that was halfway up. Anyway, go on.
Although there was a small amount of cover afforded by my jacket, it was nowhere near enough. Fortunately, my boxer shorts were in better condition, i.e. clean and in one piece, so I'd be able to keep my modesty in check, but the colour that they were could still be noticed through the massive rip. I set about trying to make good. Initial attempts with the paper clips didn't work. In retrospect, I should have asked for a stapler, but I discovered that here's the thing, unwinding the clips meant that I could wire my trousers together. It wasn't perfect, as there were gaps, but at least it was no longer hanging open. I left the toilet with a nagging feeling between my legs, and I waited for my escort. It's a sentence I haven't read in a confession before. My mind was no longer focused on the interview ahead of me, but on the problem that it wasn't possible to sit down without drawing blood.
What colour was the chair?
Despite the fact that the body has a natural crevice.
No, we do apologise unreservedly for this. Has this been checked?
And it's gone through all the...
Yes.
And that some of the wiring sat neatly in the valley without being too jabby. It was not enough, really, so now my mind was more focused on my wardrobe malfunction and wounds than on the answers I should have been giving in the interview. I was also given a tour of the building, which was mercifully devoid of a lot of people. I just had hope that whilst I was walking slightly behind my tour guide, no one was following me, especially up the stairs. Eventually, the interview and tour ordeal was over, but there was still one more problem. I actually had to get home. Being a poor graduate, I didn't have money for anything more than bus rides, having spent a lot on the train fare. Certainly not enough to buy a new pair of trousers anyway, so my journey from the research centre took place. A long walk to the bus stop, followed by a bus ride, standing and now jabbing room only. A train to London, again standing and jabbing a lot. Sitting on the tube, standing and then bleeding a little. A final bus ride to Felixstowe, seating and bleeding. And a long walk back to my parents. Oh, the chafing. My mum and dad, being the wonderful people that they are, were sympathetic to my plight once they'd stopped laughing. So I seek forgiveness from the interview panel who must have wondered how someone so distracted had the ability to get a 2-1 in engineering. I also seek forgiveness from anyone who received a shocking view, be they the people at the research centre or the unfortunate seated commuters whose eye line was at exactly the wrong height. Whilst it wasn't a full moon, it was at least a partial lunar eclipse, and not the sort of thing that they would be expecting or wanting. As for the interview myself, I never did hear back about the job. Maybe it was so traumatic for them that it's taken them nearly 20 years to decide. Anyway, Roger in Rugby. Thank you very much indeed. We got through it in the end, but it was a challenge in places. Well, you know, the word gusset doesn't turn up a lot.
Or indeed valley,
in confession, but it's a good comedy word. Sister Rebecca.
That's a terrible scenario, that story. I can't even imagine how awful that must have been. I remember going to a George Michael concert once when his trousers split.
Oh, his trousers.
His trousers split, but obviously being George Michael, he could just go off
purpose.
stage and get a new pair of trousers.
He did it on purpose.
I mean, this is just terrible. You can't even think what you would have done. I mean, what would you have done in that situation? Probably the same.
No.
So I really feel sorry for
He showed a lot of
Roger.
initiative, though. You know, wiring his trousers together is pretty good.
Yeah, I think if I'd been Roger in that situation, I would have just walked out. I don't think I could have gone through the interview. So good for you, Roger, for going through the interview and trying to answer the questions. And I just feel sorry for you. So yeah, you're completely forgiven.
Was it obvious that George Michael's trousers had
Yeah, very obvious.
Was it red?
Well, he was wearing black trousers and then white underwear.
I reckon that was almost certainly deliberate.
Do you think?
Yes.
That old trick.
I bet you screamed
Did you?
I screamed in laughter.
Yeah, right.
As did everyone else.
Yes, the Venerable Deadly.
Totally forgiven, I think, on this one. Totally forgiven. A very creative solution, and he kept going to the end, to the bitter end, as it happened to be. And good use of paper clips. Good use of paper clips. I think it's very inventive.
Brother Matthew wanders in with this.
This was superb. This is the best one we've had for a while. I think the fact that he shows so much initiative with him having the engineering degree, you'd have thought the people on the interview panel would have thought, yes, this is exactly the kind of chap we want, just as long as he can get slightly better fitting pants. And whether he go into the interview saying, is it all right if I stand throughout the entire interview? Is that okay? Just really don't want to sit down, if that's all right. But frankly, any confession that involves the word gusset and the chafing, that means you're definitely going to get forgiven. Definitely forgiven.
The Confessions Podcast.
So tonight's confession comes from, it's pretty anonymous. It's just signed with the letter D. That's it, D, from somewhere in a theatre, somewhere down south. But down south from where, we don't know, so it's deliberately vague and you're about to find out why. Father Simon and the Merciful Magnanimous Mutual. I am withholding my full actual name as the place of employment where my misdemeanour occurred just happens to be the place where I still work. And the ramifications of my actions still echo loud within the fabric of the building. My confession dates back to the summer of 1999 when I was a fresh-faced 24-year-old. I have always been in love with theatre and was convinced at that time that my big break as the world's greatest actor was just around the corner. The city where I live and grew up, somewhere in the south, is lucky enough to have a modern theatre, built at some point in the years after the Second World War. It has a large 1,000-seater auditorium and a smaller studio theatre. This is narrowing it down as we work our way through. In the early 90s, the smaller studio theatre was home to our own youth music theatre, of which I was very proud to be a part. Whilst there, I managed to talk myself into getting a job in the box office, and eventually, after attending many first-night parties and functions, got to know the in-house stage management team. Anyway, my foot was in the door. I managed to get plenty of work throughout that summer as I seemed to be doing something right. I was becoming a member of the team, and this is where the problem started. Becoming a member of the team and being incredibly inexperienced in actually working backstage left me wide open to pranks and wind-ups. Looking back now, I can't believe I was so incredibly green, but many laughs were had at my expense, like being sent to the local hardware store to ask for tartan paint. Now, this is an old standby, but anyway, D fell for it. Anyway, I gradually learnt to question pretty much everything that I was told. On one particular fit-up, I was working within the lighting department running some cables. This was the domain of the head flyman, the man in charge of the theatre's rigging system. We'll call him Barry. Whilst I was running cables over a rail, Barry growled at me in his incredibly broad West Country accent.
Or
shall I?
I think so.
Go on.
Well, look, it might be a little bit Suffolk, but anyway, it's just going to be... Okay. So Barry growled at me in his incredibly broad West Country accent. You watch out for that lever there. That's for the drencher, that is. You'll have water everywhere. What? You watch out for that. That's for the drencher. It's for the drencher. You be careful.
Yes, okay.
Anyway, it's not going to get any better.
No, it's not.
I'm actually auditioning for the Archers, that's what it is. Having never heard of a drencher before, I asked what it was, and Barry proceeded to tell me that there was apparently a massive trough of water high above the stage, and in the event of a fire, the drencher would flood the stage with water. Well, I looked up to the grid and I could see absolutely nothing but empty fly bars and fly wires. Yeah, okay, Barry, I thought, sure, I believe you, whatever. Though we didn't say that in 1999, but that's what I was thinking. No one is going to believe a word he's saying. Fast forward a few weeks and another show is in. It's the local amateur company giving their version of the classic musical The Sound of Music. This was the highlight of their performance calendar, and they went all out with their impressive scenery and costumes, a full orchestra, and a company worthy of a professional production. My backstage cues included moving trees around, setting and striking various bits of the Abbey, and at the end of Act 1, flying in the Mother Abbess's office. On the second or third night of the run, I can't quite remember which, I popped up to my platform high up and I flew in the scenery and I started back down towards the stage. As I was leaving, I happened to glance high to my left, and there it was, glinting at me in the reflected lights of the on-stage action, the lever that Barry had told me was part of the drencher. As I passed it, I had a little giggle to myself, reached out my hand and gave it a little smack.
Of course.
Remember, we're mid-production here. The noise that followed, Father Simon, has stayed with me for the rest of my life. I can still hear it as clear as bell to this day. There was a loud, metallic, clanking noise, a screech of heavy metal moving slowly against heavy metal, a strange whooshing sound, and then silence. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a mass of something rush by on its way to the stage and straight on top of the Mother Abbess and the Amdram's very own Julie Andrews, just as the band was striking up Climb Every Mountain. Never had the line Ford Every Stream seemed more appropriate. You see, it turned out that Barry had been telling the truth, and at the top of the fly tower there was indeed a massive trough filled to the brim with water. Water that had been added to the trough and only topped up occasionally when the theatre had been built. Water that had been standing there since the 1970s. When I made it back down to stage level, all hell had broken loose. There was water everywhere, across the stage, up the walls, dripping from the fixtures and fittings, in the corridors off the stage, and flowing down the stairwells into the basement. All power had been fused by the water, and the stage and auditorium were glowing eerily in the theatre's emergency lighting. People were running around like extras from Titanic. The set had been utterly destroyed. To make matters worse, once the water had hit stage level, it rushed upstage, collecting dirt and dust and debris on the way, hit the back wall, and then ran all the way back down again into the orchestra pit and over the first few rows of the audience. It was utter carnage. I have to say now that no one was hurt and everything that had been damaged was replaced by the venue's insurance. But anyway, Father Simon, in the understanding united, I throw myself on your mercy and ask for your forgiveness, not for almost drowning two of the leads in an otherwise outstanding but unfortunately short-lived production of this classic show, nor for covering the orchestra and the first few rows of the audience in a torrent of 20-year-old water, and heaven knows what else, and not for closing the theatre for 2 months after the incident, because they benefited from the complete auditorium backstage refurb that they got after all. Yeah. I do have a need forgiveness for my actions immediately following my actions. You see, once I'd knocked the lever into its upright position, I panicked. Not wanting to get fired and desperate to cover my own back, I knocked the lever back into its normal position before running down to the stage level, covering myself in water as I went. Look, I'm so wet, so that it looked as though I'd been there when it happened, joining in with the disbelief and anger and confusion happening on stage. What happened? Where did that come from? Unbelievably, I was never asked any questions, and the praise I received for helping on the night in question was bittersweet. The fault was put down to the drencher system being old and completely replaced with the refurb. For the record, the theatre is still operating and doing very well, and I'm still working there on a casual basis, and it still has a drencher, only now it is a completely enclosed system so that no one can activate it out of curiosity. Lots of love, D, somewhere in the theatre, somewhere down south. I had never heard of a drencher either. I did not know that obviously it's a very important thing. If there's an emergency, that's what happens. You pull a lever, boom, everything's covered completely in water. You're not supposed to just flick it as you go past, though, Dee, just to see what happens. But that is indeed what happened. Let's see what Sister Jules makes of that.
I think, by the way, the West Country thing, I think it's either the brew house in Taunton or the Northcott in Exeter, just by the by. I'd have
very specific.
I'd have probably done the same thing. I'd probably flicked it, because why not? It was in keeping with the production, what happened. The water was at a perfect timing. It wasn't done maliciously. And the fact that Dee still works there, I think, is probably punishment enough. And they did get a refit out of it.
They did, yes, from the insurance. Yeah.
So I'm going to forgive, of course.
Okay, just because Barry's got a West Country accent, though, it could have been Cambridge.
That's true.
He could have been moving around.
Could have been,
and obviously from my accent, he could have been from absolutely anywhere.
Romford.
So anyway, what do you say, Brother Matthew?
Yes, well, isn't the true culprit here the people who are making him do all these pranks or going on these wild goose chases when he first started getting the job, and therefore that led to him not believing your man about the drencher.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so therefore it's not his fault. Also, the theatre got a full refurb and everything was fine. And also inspired decision to cover yourself in water. Yeah, absolutely. I was down here. Look at me. I'm so wet. Oh, it's a nightmare, isn't it? And all the water's everywhere. Look at me. I am wet, so I was definitely not me.
You're almost quite dramatic.
Yeah, almost. This story absolutely touched all of my bases. A few of my favourite things. Definitely forgiven.
The Confessions Podcast.
Thank you very much indeed for downloading this special Confessions podcast featuring some special confessions from the Crypt. We're back to normal next week.
Go in peace.